Welcome to part two of episode 5 of Ask the Experts here on May the 4th. Be with you. I'm back again with Amanda Thrash, who has been so kind to answer our questions. And Amanda, I'm going to go ahead and just get right into it,
Great.
to the first question. Um, and what is the most common question you get about assistive technology from parents, and then also from teachers, and then from the parents who work with students in the district?
It's a good question. I had a hard time with this one because I feel like we get so many broad questions or so many different questions because assistive technology covers so many different areas. I asked my colleague Maddie McAllen, and she said she often gets the question of whether or not technology is a crutch or if it's used just kind of as like a band-aid kind of for and doesn't really help the problem. So that's a question we get a lot, and our answer to that is no. Technology can really be used as a really helpful, resourceful, like a supplemental tool. That's why it's an accommodation. It helps to kind of bridge the gaps between students where they have some learning differences, and it levels out the playing field for our students.
Nice. Um, so the second question I have is my daughter has a 504, so she might not get access to assistive technology because the counselor who manages her plan might not be aware of all that is available. Should I reach out to her counselor? And I think this is from your talk that you'd given. You'd mentioned something
Yeah,
like
so I think
that.
I feel bad. I feel like I didn't quite explain that correctly when I in the presentation, or maybe wasn't clear enough. So what I was sharing, it kind of was that like special education teachers who manage an IEP have a little more background in their education programs around technology and resources because it's common for students in special education to use assistive tech. And counselors are the 504 coordinators in our district, and a lot of counseling programs might not have as much background information, so that's kind of more as alluding to. But all the counselors in our district are very aware that assistive technology is a resource that they should be leveraging for students on the 504. There's this year, the 504s have moved to the system Embrace, and there's a box on there for assistive technology software. So it's something that everyone's seeing while they're writing up a 504 plan. So it's and they definitely know how to contact me, and the counselors are amazing. A lot of times they like to sit in and they get really excited when they learn something new, and then they follow up often to be like, oh, we tried that and it worked great. And we have referral forms for both special education and counseling, and they're pretty much neck and neck with the amount that we get from each department. So counselors definitely reach out. But if you do feel
Great.
like it might have been overlooked, I would definitely recommend reaching out to your counselor and asking to start the process for assistive technology consultation.
Perfect. All right. The next question I have is, are Gen Ed teachers aware of what's available in Assistive Tech? And could they initiate a need for the Assistive Tech team to come help a student? Or is that only for students with IEPs and 504s?
That's a good question. I think the general education teachers definitely, since we've become one-to-one now this year, are becoming more aware of assistive technology, and especially during COVID when we went remote, that was like a big win for us. We got very excited in our little tech AP department because we've been, handing out laptops for years when it's like we really wanted every student to have one, so it makes it a little bit more less different than their peers, but. So a lot of gen ed teachers learned during COVID, and then now like that, like I said, that we're one-to-one, that about the different technology resources we have because we have so many options that are like available, like the speech to text. I know a lot of general education teachers who encourage their students to use that tool. We have an ed tech department in our district, and there's 4 ed tech TOSA, so it's a teacher on a special assignment, and 3 ed tech TOSAs for secondary, so 4 primary, 3 secondary, and they're out in the buildings and we collaborate with them a lot, so we like to share our resources, and then they're able to help with the gen ed teacher trainings, and they have a blog, and I've written articles on the blog before about assistive technology and something like dictation and how the Edge browser has a read aloud feature. So yeah, I think they're becoming more aware. We also have Kite Learning, which is an online curriculum for ed tech software and different technologies. And we have trainings on there for Learning Ally, which is our audiobook program. We have that for co-writer word prediction. So, and that's open to all staff in the district. So, yeah, I think that there's resources out there, and that they are becoming more aware of what's available. And as far as initiating a consult, They definitely could. I don't know, not necessarily every general education teacher knows about our little AT team since it's just, you know, Maddie, Dasha, and I here. But if they do, we've definitely gotten calls before. We had a third grade teacher a couple weeks ago reach out because she was at a conference and learned about this new math program that she wanted to try. And so I hopped on a Zoom with her and the product developer just to kind of see if it would be a good product to use in our district. Unfortunately, it wasn't,
So,
but
so if a parent sees their child struggling in a class and maybe doesn't have an IEP or 504, but they could reach out to the gen ed teacher and say, have you reached out to the system? I mean, is that how the process would go
no,
for
I would
that?
generally,
Or,
I would say they would have to go. So if it's hard to say because if they are struggling, I would want them to get that. Like, we'll try interventions first. So that's our
yeah,
multi-tiered systems of support. So the first step, I think, would be talking with the counselor, and then you'd initiate the guidance team process.
okay,
And then that would decide whether or not, because if the student really does need it, then we'd want a 504. We'd want to develop a 504 plan.
okay.
And the ed tech TOSAs are pretty good about being able, so I think that that would probably be their first would be the ed tech TOSA because they know a lot about the general like
But
tier
the
supports we have.
parent would go to the ed tech TOSA or
The
the,
gen ed teacher
pa-
would. So yeah, if they, I would say
okay,
the parent
all
could
right.
talk to the gen ed teacher and
And just,
um, I mean, worst case scenario, it doesn't hurt to reach out to us, but I would say that that's
yeah,
more, we'd get that more from like a counselor, special ed teacher, a
okay,
therapist, like one of the OTs, an SLP, the school psych.
okay. All right. And so the next question I have is, how quickly do advances in assistive tech happen, and how does the district keep up with those advances?
They're happening pretty often and regularly. It's sometimes feels like it's hard to keep up with, but we do our best, and we have the State Education Technology Center has great resources, and they have AT statewide AT meetings twice a year, and part of it at the end is an AT Smackdown where people are able to share any cool and exciting new technologies that they've been using with students. Or if they've been to a conference and they want to share some of the resources that they took away from that. And we also attend conferences ourselves. So Maddie and I went to Closing the Gap conference last year, and there's in the past few years there's been a gen ed and special ed conference downtown Seattle. I think I saw they canceled it this year, but we've gone in the past. There's to see some AT specific speakers. So we're always
Mhm.
trying to keep up and see what other people are using and to learn what else is out there and make sure that we have kind of, you know, that we're meeting all the needs of our students.
Right. And then if I know of an assistive tech that has been newly released that I think my child would benefit from in school, who should I go to show them the tech? And how long is the process for its use to get approved?
So that's a good question of who to
And I guess this
show.
is from a parent, or I
Yeah.
guess it could be from a teacher too. I don't know.
I would say I would talk to the teacher first just to see, hey, do you think this would make sense for like the curriculum that they're using? Because I think that
Mhm.
like if it's a piece of if it's software, that depends on what, like again, what type of program they're using. Because we have two different learning management systems, but we have the Canvas that we're using in secondary, and then we also have Seesaw in elementary. So
Mhm.
sometimes some of those like overlaying tools play better with some than others. Um, but we're always willing to explore. And as far as how long it takes, it really depends. If it's like something like a new type of switch or something that would really help accessibility for a student, we can order one right away if we know that's going to meet the student's need. But if it's something like software, we have to test it a little bit first to make sure
Mhm.
it's compatible with enough of our programs in the district because it's hard because you know we're a Microsoft district, which a lot of programs are compatible with Microsoft, but there's some software programs that make and develop more for Google Classroom. So those
Mhm.
don't always play well with our you know internet or curriculums that we have across the level. So, but we're always open to trying new things. Like I was sharing, there's the math. The gen ed teacher who reached out to a math program, and I was super excited about it. It looks really cool, but unfortunately, it's all designed for Google Classroom, and so it would not work well. It'd just be too hard because we have to then create Google accounts for the students and the teachers don't have them, so things don't share well, and then they're limited on the email. So there's just it's too many hoops, especially when a lot of times students who are using these supports have like executive functioning challenges, and so to layer on more steps with the programs like that's going to make it harder than it. But again, working with talking to the developer, you know, letting them know, hey, we'd be totally on board to support this if you could have it developed to work with Microsoft. So we're you know we're asking you know for changes in technology too from software developers and creators.
Um, and then let's see. Once my student has been given assistive tech to use in school, is there an evaluative process that documents if it's successful or, and if it's not, I guess what happens or,
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what the technology is. A lot of our programs are able to look at the data. So our programs like Co-Writer, the word prediction software, Snap and Read text to speech, we can see how often the student's using it. That's a really good way to see its like effectiveness initially, and then a lot of times we'll just consult with the teachers. We kind of leave it up to the classroom teacher because it's hard for us to continually check in when we're supporting the whole district. But if it's a new piece of software and I can tell when I'm working with a student that they might be struggling to get started with it, I'll schedule a follow-up 2 weeks out and then kind of go from there. Some students, you can see they pick it up right away, and I'm like, oh, I know that they're going to run with this and it's going to be great for them. And the ongoing assessment, I think, would be more um, on the teacher to kind of monitor that and then reach out if more supports are needed or if we need to change up the programming at all. But at minimum, it would be annually at the IEP and the 504, but more often than that.
all right. And then this last question is, or my son is struggling with math. He's in high school and avoids taking notes or writing anything down. He also struggles with anything that has a lot of steps in it. Is there tech that can support his access to math?
Yeah, math is such a tricky one, and it's definitely the area we're seeing the most product development come out about. Like I said, that Kiwi program, that one would have been really cool. But we do have a couple different options, and again, it kind of depends on the curriculum. I think high schools are using Alex, but it also depends whether it's calculus or geometry or I don't remember all the different kinds of math anymore. But it depends on what the software is and what would work best with that. We have OneNote, which is a nice like open formatting word processing where you can set the background to be like graph paper. So if you are trying to align things, and you can use shapes. So sometimes with like geometry, if you have to, or trigonometry, when you have to draw different triangles or angles and make graphs, there's a lot of tools that are helpful for that. And they also have like an ink to math feature where it can help take uh, different equations, because I know the equations are not on our keyboard and that easy to find. So it makes math a little bit easier to be done digitally. But it kind of depends on the student if that kind of system works with the way that their brain works and the way that helps support the challenge area that they're having. So I would say if that's the case, reach out to case manager and do an AT consult, and hopefully we'll be able to help.
Okay, that's great. And then, is there anything else that you'd like to add, or think we should know about assistive technology?
Trying to think. I feel um, maybe just don't hesitate to encourage your students to use it. If like I've said before, it's definitely not a crutch. It's a really supportive tool. So modeling the use of technology too. If you have a child or a student who's resistant to using it and doesn't like it, you can model using it. So use your cell phone and doing. I'm like, oh, look at, I just use speech to text. Like maybe you could try that later on that writing project. Like
Hmm.
make it a little exciting and normalize it a little bit. So yeah, I would say just to encourage your students to use it, and yeah.
And actually, that makes me think of something else.
Okay.
So, what if we're not very techie ourselves? Like, how can we support? Would there be training for parents on how to support their kids using assistive tech? Or,
Absolutely. If you have a student, so it's hard for us. We've entertained the idea of doing like a parent night, but because it's so different based on the curriculum and the student,
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
hard to do a general one because what we say might not cover everything for, but if you have a student who's using assistive tech and you know that at school, we're happy to schedule a time to meet to make sure that it's working. That's one thing I loved about COVID actually, was because the parents were right there when we're doing consults. And so I'm like,
yeah.
oh yeah, this is how you use it. And so yeah, we're definitely available to train parents and meet and show you all the cool tools too.
Awesome. That's so great. And thanks so much for taking your time to
Of
come
course.
out to this and to do this, present this information. It's super helpful. I'm really excited about this episode.
Great. Well, I hope
And
it helps.
thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you.